when the dynamics of rule change, then the politics of whatever it is you use to keep people in line has to change. In other words, there was not a King James authorized revision until a political need came for it. It didn't come because one day King James got up and said, you know, I think I'd like to have me another Bible. King James didn't give a damn about the Bible. All he was concerned primarily about was where he was going to have his next homosexual relationship. You know, well, hey, I don't deal with it. I don't have no problem. People have whatever sexual preference they want. But these are the same people that tells you that homosexuality is a sin. Says so right here in this Bible this man had. King James didn't give a damn about the Bible. All he was concerned primarily about was where he was going to have his next homosexual relationship. You know, well, hey, I don't deal with it. I don't have no problem. People have whatever sexual preference they want. But these are the same people that tells you that homosexuality is a sin. Says so right here in this Bible this man had. Let me just tie something in for you. I know my folks. No, never go nowhere with an empty gun. Some of y'all may be aware of this book, Dirt. If you ain't, you ought to be. Right in here that tells us about the great King James. It was a dirty age, among others just as dirty. They're not talking about Africans now here. I'm talking about your wonderful superior European, the first people who invented the term dirty nigger. All right? All right. But one consideration lends point to Carlyle's disgust. King James himself, the man who gave us this beautiful authorized version here. England has had weak kings, foreign kings, and lazy kings in plenty. It has also had pompous and self-vaunting kings. Unfortunately, in James I of England and VI of Scotland, the weakness and the belief in the divine right of kings were combined in grotesque concert. His extraordinary belief in his own superhuman powers only emphasized his sadly human shortcomings. And here's a quote from somebody contemporary. His beard was very thin, his tongue too large for his mouth, and made him drink very uncommonly, meaning he made a lot of noise when he's trying to swallow, as if eating his drink, which came out into the cup on each side of his mouth. His skin was as soft as taffet sarcenet, which felt so because lice and him, and he never washed his hands. Neither did he wash his behind. I put the behind there, right? Only, and this is somebody talking who knew him, only rubbed his finger in slightly with the wet end of a napkin. His legs were very weak, having had, it was thought, seen some foul play in his youth, or rather before he was born. That he was not able to stand at 7 years of age, that weakness made him ever leaning on other men's shoulders. His walk was ever circular, his fingers ever in that walk fiddling about like his codpiece. He went on to say, his manners, as a result of the failure to instruct him properly, are aggressive and uncivil, both in speaking, eating, clothes, and conversations. He goes on to note that he combined his graceless outward appearance with other more fundamental weaknesses. He was the irritating type of homosexual who insists on promiscuous public embraces. Sorry about that. Directed to any attractive young man in his reach. Fortuné says cautiously that one of his defects is, quote, that he loves inexactly and obstinately, as long as they are young men. Sir Henry Wotton, writing a confidential dispatch for the Grand Duke of Tuscany, says, and I quote, "He is very familiar with his domestics and gentlemen of the chamber." But then the other Francis says he's more explicit, and he draws attention to another unpleasant effect of that tongue which was too large for the mouth, that he would go over and proposition young men for something that is known in Latin as fellatio. I have heard that Sir Henry Rich, who the king made the Earl of Holland, and some others refuse his Majesty's favor. I said the English language is something else, and then refuse his favor. Upon those conditions they subscribe to, who fill that place in his affection. Rich, losing that opportunity to be the king's lover, his curious face and complexion afforded him by turning aside and spitting after the king had slobbered in his mouth. Now I ask you, now I don't argue that maybe somebody who is homosexual or whatever cannot sit and they come to the book, but then we have to look, given this man's habits, and these are contempt, given his habits, and when you consider how the Protestant church today is all over kicking homosexuals out and whatnot, how do we account for it? How, you see, nowadays that's why they want you to take things on faith. You know, how do you describe King James? Are you saying, well, he was excused because he's a king? They ain't supposed to make them exceptions, are they? But on top of the other arrogance, he also considered himself a theological expert. And that is why, so when the question of why, with all, at that time there was about 25 or 30 different Bibles already in existence, then I think you would be well justified in asking, why another? Then we have to look at the politics of the time. We have to look at what was happening all throughout Europe. We have to look at the rationale of what was needed. We have to look at the struggle between the various so-called Christian sects. And then we see, as he stated, I'm having all of these problems here. Catholics fighting this and all the other stuff. And each one declaring, basing their right on this Bible, or that chapter, that chapter. He tells Francis Bacon and them to come and sit down, and you got a year to come up with a Bible that I can live with, and I want this Bible to deal with all of the things politically. In other words, what he's saying, I want a Bible that can help me rule. A Bible that people can read and which will tell him, servant, obey your master and don't ever cross the king. The king is next to God. And what was it he said? He wanted to prove what? The divine right of kings. So if I have a Bible, which I call a holy book, which so states that, and remember, less than 1% of people could read anyway. Most people got their knowledge of Bible secondhand by those who can read. So all you had to do was say the divine right of kings. I have been, here's that chrism thing again, anointed, and being anointed by the priesthood. And as I said to you earlier, they work hand in glove, the priesthood, the kings, and the bankers. All of them work, and the governors. The king tells you what to do. The church rubber stamps it. The priest say if you don't do it, you go into hell. And the banker keeps your butt poor so you don't have no other options.